I was 75 years old when everything happened, though some days I felt more like 50 and others closer to 100. Age is a strange companion. Sometimes gentle, sometimes cruel. But until the night of the fire, I carried it with a kind of quiet dignity. My house, the little white one with blue shutters on Willow Bend Road, had been my world for nearly 5 decades. My husband, David, built half of it with his own hands. Every nail, every wooden beam, every brick carried memories. When he passed away, the house became my anchor. My children, however, saw it differently. I used to believe children change slowly, but I realized they change all at once, like seasons flipping overnight. One moment they call you mom. The next they talk to you as if you're a burden wrapped in wrinkles. I had 2 children, both grown with families of their own. They visited rarely, and when they did, it always felt like they were checking inventory rather than checking on me. The shift started small, in the way these things always do. A suggestion slipped into conversation. Maybe you shouldn't be living alone, Mom. Another comment disguised as concern. This house is too big for you to handle. I smiled through all of it because I refused to be the helpless old woman they imagined. I still cooked my own meals, tended my roses, and walked to town every morning for groceries. My body may have slowed, but my mind was sharp as ever. Yet something about their tone felt off. Not warm. Not loving. Calculated. Then came the day I found them whispering in the living room when they thought I was napping. I didn't hear every word, but I caught enough words like policy, appraisal, payout, and timing. The way their voices lowered when I entered the room confirmed what my heart feared. They weren't worrying about my safety. They were planning something around my house. Around my life. From that day onward, I paid attention. Every visit, every question, every suggestion. I watched them all. They asked strange things about my insurance. They asked whether I had trouble sleeping. They asked whether the smoke detectors worked. That one chilled me the most. I began keeping an old camcorder close by. It wasn't fancy, just something David and I once used to film birthdays and Christmas mornings. I didn't use it out of paranoia. I used it out of instinct. A woman who has lived 75 years learns to trust her instincts. My days were quiet but heavy. Even the sun seemed to shine differently, thin and hesitant, as though it knew what was coming. I tried to keep my life normal. I baked, cleaned, listened to the radio, and pretended everything was fine. But late at night, when the house settled and the wind whispered through the chimney, I would lie awake wondering, how did my children become strangers? Sometimes I blamed myself. I wondered if I had failed them somehow, if I had given too much or too little. Other nights I felt angry, furious that my own flesh and blood could look at me and see nothing more than a check waiting to be cashed. Still, I never confronted them. Not yet. I told myself I needed proof. And deep down, I didn't want to believe my children capable of anything truly terrible. But betrayal rarely announces itself with thunder. It creeps in quietly, wearing the face of someone you once rocked to sleep. I didn't know that I was standing on the edge of a nightmare. I didn't know the house I loved would soon become a furnace. I didn't know my children had already decided on the day, the hour, and the way they believed I would die. All I knew was that something dark was moving beneath the surface of my ordinary life, and that I had to be ready. The night of the fire began like any other. Quiet, still, wrapped in the kind of darkness that settles gently over a small town. I remember making myself a cup of chamomile tea and sitting by the window, watching the streetlights flicker like old, tired stars. My bones ached a little more than usual, but at 75, aches are old friends who visit often. What I didn't know then was that 2 of my children were already watching my house from their car parked down the road. I would learn later that they had been planning this night for weeks. They chose a weekend when the neighbors were away. They checked the weather to ensure the wind blew in the right direction. They even rehearsed what they would tell the authorities. But fate has a strange sense of timing. That afternoon, while searching for a box of old photographs, I found my camcorder tucked behind some holiday decorations in the garage. I charged it, out of habit more than intention, and left it on my workbench. I didn't know it would save my life. Around midnight, I heard a sound. Not loud, not alarming, but distinct. A crunch of gravel. A low whisper. My instincts kicked in sharp and cold. The kind of instincts only decades of living can carve into a woman. I turned off the lights and moved quietly toward the garage, the only place where the door clicked softly instead of squeaking. I slipped inside and locked it behind me. My heart was thudding in my chest, but my mind stayed clear. The air smelled of oil, old wood and dust. The camcorder sat where I had left it, its tiny red charging light glowing like a watchful eye. Something told me to pick it up. Through the small garage window facing the backyard, I saw them, my own children, standing near the porch with gasoline cans in their hands. My daughter's voice drifted through the cold air. "Hurry up. We need to be gone before the flames get big." They moved with practice, not hesitation. That was what broke my heart the most. No fear. No second thoughts. They spread gasoline along the porch, the windowsills, the flower beds David planted with me 50 years ago. My son kicked in a basement window and splashed gasoline inside. "It'll look natural once it burns," he said. "The report will say she fell asleep. Old people do that all the time." Old people. They had turned my age into a weapon. I lifted the camcorder, my hands trembling but steady enough. The little screen lit up, capturing their silhouettes, their words, the glint of metal as my daughter struck a lighter. I zoomed in on their faces, the faces I once kissed goodnight. The faces that now watched my house like hunters waiting for prey to fall. When the first flame caught, it wasn't loud. It was almost beautiful, a soft bloom of orange that began to crawl along the porch. But beauty turned to terror quickly. Flames exploded upward, licking the siding, climbing toward the roof. Windows cracked. Smoke billowed like a dark, angry storm. And then I heard the words that froze my soul. "By morning," my daughter said, "they'll think she died in the fire." She said it casually. Not a flicker of remorse. Not a quiver of grief. My own children were declaring me dead. I filmed everything. Every angle. Every word. Every spark. The fire spread fast, too fast. I felt the heat even inside the garage. If I stayed too long, I would truly die, trapped in the place I had gone to hide. I slipped out the back door, using the trees as my cover, clutching the camcorder to my chest like a lifeline. The night swallowed me as I walked away from the burning remains of my life. Flames roared behind me, devouring everything I ever loved. But I was not weak. I was not helpless. And I was very much alive. They thought they had written my death. They didn't know I was filming their crime, every second of it. They didn't know I would return. Not yet. If anyone had told me that I would witness the destruction of my own home, and then walk away like a ghost, I would have laughed. But that night, as I moved through the darkness clutching my camcorder, laughter was the farthest thing from my mind. The cold air bit my cheeks. My legs trembled from fear and exhaustion. Still, I kept walking until the burning glow behind me faded into the distance. I didn't have a plan. Not yet. At 75, running wasn't something I was built for anymore, but something deeper, something primal. Push me forward. Survival. Betrayal has a way of giving strength to even the oldest bones. I walked for nearly 30 minutes until I reached the old Miller farmhouse. Henry Miller had been a friend of my husband's, and his daughter Ruth still lived there. She was about my age, a widow like me. When she opened the door, her eyes widened in shock. I must have looked like a phantom. Hair wild from smoke, clothes smelling of gasoline, eyes swollen from tears. "Good Lord, what happened to you?" she gasped. My voice cracked as I answered. "My children, they burned my house. They said I died inside." Ruth didn't ask for explanations. She simply wrapped a coat around me and guided me inside. Some people in life are blessings you don't recognize until you desperately need them. While she made tea, I sat at her kitchen table, staring at my camcorder as though it were alive. It held the truth. It held my proof. It held the faces of the two people I once trusted more than anyone else on earth. For the next few days I stayed with Ruth hidden from the world. The news spread fast. Elderly woman believed dead in house fire. My name, my face, my life appeared on every channel. Hearing strangers speak of my tragic death was surreal. Hearing my own children pretend to mourn, that nearly shattered me. My son stood before the cameras, crocodile tears glistening in his eyes. "Our mother was fragile," he said. "It's devastating. We're trying to stay strong." Fragile? I nearly threw the remote at the screen. My daughter spoke next, her voice trembling in an imitation of grief. We begged her to move in with us. If she had listened, maybe this wouldn't have happened. I felt a bitterness rise in my chest that tasted like metal and old wounds. But anger wasn't the only thing inside me. There was clarity too. That's when I decided. They wouldn't get away with this. Revenge wasn't something I had ever imagined for myself. Growing old softens most hearts. But betrayal hardens them again. And theirs had been the deepest cut of all. I contacted the only lawyer I truly trusted, an old friend of my husband's, Harold Jennings. He arrived at Ruth's house the very next morning, his eyes widening when he saw me alive. "Good heavens," he whispered. "They said you were dead." "I know," I replied calmly. "That's exactly why we need to move carefully." I showed him the footage. He watched every second without blinking, his face growing redder with each frame. When the screen finally went dark, he exhaled sharply. "This is damning," he said. "They'll go to prison for this." "But not yet," I said. "I want the truth to destroy them the same way they tried to destroy me." Together, we mapped out a plan. He brought in a private investigator, a quiet, sharp man named Wells who believed in evidence, not excuses. Wells helped document everything. The insurance claims my children had filed the day after the fire, the forged papers they submitted, the lies they told the authorities. While they lived their lives believing I was dead, I watched them from the shadows. I listened. I learned. I waited. There is a strange power in being presumed dead. People show their true faces when they believe you'll never see them again. By the end of the week, everything was ready. The insurance meeting was scheduled. The papers were prepared. The authorities were alerted, but told to wait. I wanted to be there. I wanted to walk in alive. I wanted their lies to collapse right in front of them. I wasn't just seeking justice. I wanted them to look into the eyes of the woman they tried to kill and realize I had survived the fire they lit. And now, I was bringing a fire of my own. The morning of the insurance meeting arrived with a chill in the air, a cold, biting wind that felt almost symbolic. It was the kind of weather that made the sky gray and heavy, like the world itself was holding its breath. I sat in the back seat of Harold's car, wrapped in a dark coat, my hands clasped tightly around the camcorder that had become my shield, my evidence, my survival. Harold drove in silence, understanding that my mind was somewhere far beyond the road in front of us. I replayed everything in my head, the gasoline cans, the laughter, the flames devouring my home, and the horrible sentence. "By morning they'll think she died in the fire." I had lived with that sentence echoing in my skull for days. Now I was ready to return it to its owners. We arrived early. The building was a tall, glass structure with polished floors that reflected everything, even the things people wanted to hide. The insurance company had called my children in to finalize the payout. They thought this was the day they would walk away richer. They had no idea it would be the day they walked into their own downfall. I waited in a small adjoining room with tinted glass, the kind that lets you see others without being seen. My heart beat steadily, not from fear, but from a strange, powerful calm. I was 75. I had lived through loss, grief, childbirth, marriage, and the slow ache of aging. I could survive this moment too. Then they arrived. My daughter walked in first, dressed in black as though continuing her performance of the grieving child. My son followed, holding a briefcase like he was some kind of businessman instead of a criminal. They smiled politely at the insurance agent, as if tragedy had somehow made them humble. I watched their faces closely. I wanted to remember every expression, every lie, every second before the truth shattered their carefully crafted act. The insurance agent greeted them and began speaking about documents, signatures, processing times. My children nodded sympathetically, pretending to be patient and heartbroken. "It's been a terrible loss," my daughter said softly. "Yes," my son added. "We just want to honor her memory." Honor my memory. I almost laughed. Harold signaled to me. It was time. I stepped out of the small room and walked toward the conference door. My cane tapped against the floor. A quiet sound, yet somehow it echoed. When I entered, the room went utterly still. My daughter's jaw dropped. My son stumbled backward, knocking a chair over. Their faces drained of color, turning the shade of ash, the same ash they expected to find my remains in. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I simply stood there and said, "Did you miss me?" The agent looked between us, utterly confused. I thought you were dead." I finished. "So did they?" My son stuttered. Mum, we thought you were in the house." "Really?" I asked. "Then why did you say, by morning they'll think she died in the fire?" Their eyes widened with absolute terror. I lifted the camcorder and pressed play. The room filled with the sound of their own voices, planning, whispering, laughing. The video showed everything. The gas cans, the flames, the talk of insurance money, the cold declaration of my death. My daughter covered her mouth. My son swayed as though his legs might give out. The agent froze, his expression hardening into disbelief and disgust. Within minutes, the police, already waiting nearby, walked into the room. They handcuffed my children gently but firmly. Neither struggled. Neither spoke. They didn't have to. Their wide, empty eyes said everything. As they were let out, my daughter whispered, How did you survive?" I looked at her, not with anger, but with a sorrow so deep it nearly broke me again. "You failed to check the garage," I said softly. "You never knew your own mother well enough to know she always keeps the lights off at night." She lowered her head as if that truth hurt more than the handcuffs. When they were gone, the agent turned to me with a shaken voice. "We will assist you however we can, ma'am." "I don't want their money," I replied. "I just want my life back." In the weeks that followed, their insurance fraud money was seized, and what remained legally transferred to me. I used it not out of greed, but out of necessity, to rebuild my home exactly as it once stood. Same blue shutters, same white walls, same rose garden, because some things like memories deserve resurrection. As I stood in front of my new house, with the sun warming my face, I felt something unexpected. Not triumph, not revenge, peace. I had survived the fire. I had survived their betrayal. And in the ashes of everything they tried to destroy, I rebuilt myself stronger than before. A 75-year-old woman. Alive. Unbroken. And finally free.